to the planet here after that lovely meditation. Rising Tide is a Sufi-based organization down in Sarasota. And if you look it up in the dictionary, you'll see that the Sufis are defined as Islamic mystics. So naturally we celebrate Buddha's birthday. Think about the way the world was about 2,700 years ago, at the time that Buddha was born. At that time, the history tells us, people did not have the way to enlightenment. There was a way that had been known among the Hindus, and that way had been lost. And the situation that the Buddha found himself in was one of a seeker seeking something that he knew existed, something that at least others suspected existed, but no one had at that time the way to. Now, he found the way, and that's one of the reasons why we're celebrating his birthday today. But the other thing that he did that was equally important is he learned how to teach the way. Because if he had found it and not been able to teach it, well, nobody would have known. The result of the Buddha's accomplishment has been a transformation of the world. The way that he found and the way that he taught has, of course, extended far beyond the reach of Buddhism per se, which is why we Sufis celebrate the Buddha's birthday as well. The Buddha is a gift to all of humanity. And the Buddha was not simply a person in a place and a space and time, the way we might think of a person. We've had a little bit of talk, for example, of vibrations, and it reminded me of the de Broglie wave particle function, which of course I'm sure you all know. But just in case you don't, it's a little thing from quantum physics that states that whenever a particle or a mass of particles, like a person, moves through space, a wave is generated by that being that goes out forever. Every person has a particular resonant frequency, a particular wavelength, each one of us. And that wavelength and that frequency goes out throughout the entire universe and stays there forever. You know, St. Thomas Aquinas, I think it was, although it might have been Albertus Magnus, was contemplating the phenomenon of Jesus. And he had an interesting realization about time as a result of his meditation. And that realization, I think you can sort of, well, let's see if I can express it. In this point of view, you know, usually we think of time as something like a river that flows by. And sometimes we're like in the river, you know, sort of like bopping along, and things happen to us and we sort of get from point A to point B. But imagine that instead of being in the river of time the way we experience it, you take sort of a God's eye view of it. You might see the river beginning up in the Himalaya and rolling through and emptying out in the ocean far away. And you could see all of the river at once, at one single time. You can see the glacier melting at one end and the emptying into the sea at the other end. And from this point of view, all of these events are happening at the same time. So Thomas Aquinas said, well, yes, if you take the God's eye point of view, there is no time. Everything is actually simultaneous. And that means that things that happened in the distant past are also continuing to happen in the ever-present present. Because from this point of view, the past and the present merge together, they collapse. In the same way that a wave function collapses in quantum physics. Anyway, we have, it's not our usual way of thinking about that. But something that kind of falls out of this is that the presence of a being isn't temporarily limited. That is to say, the presence of the Buddha continues, even when the Buddha is gone from this little realm that we see around us now. This is a little bit of wisdom that, of course, we see in different guises as well. I mean, we have it in the Bodhisattva idea. The idea of beings that have left this plane are still around to help us in our endeavors on earth, to help all beings, in fact, forever after. We see it sometimes in Christianity with the regard for saints and the notion that there are beings in the Christian tradition who continue to help those here upon the earth. So we can attune to the consciousness, to the being of the Buddha, and recognize that there is help available for us, and recognize that the accomplishment of the Buddha is twofold. One is the historical accomplishment that I referred to before, that he found a way, he spread the way, and the world has been transformed as a result, and the consciousness of humanity and the paths of consciousness have been changed as a result. And the other is a little bit more subtle, but that way that the Buddha found and the being that the Buddha became is a continuing presence to us throughout the planet forever. So I'm anxious to get on with the program. I hope you don't mind if that's all I say. Thank you.